Today I'm at the Mullin Automotive Museum in Oxnard, California. This is considered to be the finest collection of French cars held privately anywhere in the world. In fact, it's rivaled only by the French National Automobile Museum. Now, Peter Mullin was a Los Angeles businessman and philanthropist, a lifelong car enthusiast, and he started buying French cars in the 1990s. Together with his wife Merle, they founded the Mullin Automotive Museum in 2010. But unfortunately, Mr. Mullin passed away in the fall of 2023, and the collection is now being dissolved. Today, Gooding & Company is offering selections from the collection at their auction, right here at the museum. So I'm going to take you inside. I'm going to show you the collection as it was, and we're also going to get a taste of what's going on the auction floor. Let's go.
For the collector car world, this is a bittersweet moment. It's the last time anyone will be able to see all of these cars together before they move on to new caretakers.
It's a tremendous privilege for Gooding & Company to have been entrusted to sell so many of Peter and Merle Mullin's special cars out of their collection. And of course, we all wish we still had Peter Mullin, but it's an absolute honor to have been chosen to sell Peter's cars.
Cars like this Hispano-Suiza J12, which many experts consider to be finer and more advanced than rivals like Mercedes-Benz, Rolls-Royce, or Duesenberg.
The Mullin Museum is mimicking 1920s, 1930s Paris, the Paris Auto Show. It's absolutely beautiful, and it really does take the visitor into that world, and the cars look very much at home in this space.
The Mullin Collection had a great variety, like this race-inspired 1922 Bugatti Type 23 Brescia Roadster, or this 37 Hispano-Suiza K6 shooting brake, but also a 28 Hispano-Suiza V12 Aero engine, and various machinery and artifacts from the Bugatti factory.
Peter Mullin was a very, very successful businessman, and together with Merle, they really became connoisseurs of French cars, of the Art Deco movement. When it first opened, they were careful to say that it was an Art Deco museum with an emphasis on cars. So he was a huge fan of the Art Deco movement, and especially its influence on the automotive world.
One rather unusual car is this 1928 Aviance Voisin Type C11 Lumineuse. It has a sleeve valve 6-cylinder engine, and although it doesn't appear so, it has a lightweight monocoque body, unlike typical sedans of the time that used internal wood framing. And the large windows give it the name Lumineuse, or light in French. Lots of external storage cases and a huge fog lamp suggest it was set up for long-distance touring. The abstract geometric upholstery fabric is a classic Voisin touch. And the Marshall lamps and nickel-plated radiator guard make for a dramatic look. Now, if the Voisin C11 is an example of form following function, this next car is just the opposite. It's a 1937 Delahaye Type 135M Cabriolet with coachwork by Fagoni and Filaschi of Paris. This is the epitome of Art Deco. Joseph Fagoni's French curve and double curve are evident in the teardrop fenders and the sweeping body lines. In fact, he introduced these styling elements on this very car. And this particular Delahaye is known as the Star of India, because its first owner shipped it to the subcontinent when it was new. Around 1939, he sold it to an Indian prince. The car faded into obscurity and finally resurfaced in 1982. Peter Mullin acquired the Star of India 10 years later and gave it a world-class restoration.
Through building their collection and showing their cars across the country, around the world really, but here in the US, I think they really increased the awareness and the desirability, the visibility of French cars of the Art Deco period. Whereas previously the focus was on American cars, American pre-war classics, maybe German cars, but French cars had a style all their own, and he's called the museum, a sub-headline is French Curves, celebrating the coachwork of, say, Gangloff and Fagoni and Filaschi. No collection has ever been put together to this degree of covering it's even more than a genre. It's the French car movement kind of from the beginning all the way through, let's call it the 80s anyway. The depth within each mark, whether it's Delahaye, Delahaye, Avions Voisins, Panhard and Levasseur, Bugatti, and then he thought, why haven't I been paying attention to Citroën? They've been around the entire time, and they've built some of the most innovative cars the world has ever seen. And all at once, he launched into Citroën, and they reconfigured the museum to do a full Citroën reveal almost. That's really part of what makes the Mullin Museum so special, that you can dive so deeply into a mark or a movement or a time period and really understand the car's role in society and how they advanced design and engineering principles. There's a lot to learn.
The coach-built era was a fascinating time. The idea of buying a bare chassis and then commissioning a bespoke body seems outlandish today, and there was one very special car in the Mullin collection that played with this concept. This is a Bugatti Type 64. 3 chassis were built, but only one ever got a body in, period. The other 2 were left unfinished after the untimely death of Jean Bugatti in a road test accident in August of 1939. So Peter Mullin collaborated with designer Stuart Reed to construct an aluminum body for the Type 64, guided by authentic period Bugatti factory plans and drawings. The panels were shaped using this mahogany body book, just as it would have been done in the 1930s. It's an homage to Jean Bugatti and an attempt to channel his genius. The car has been left unfinished so that the metalwork can be fully appreciated. Now, in contrast to the shiny Type 64, to the rear of the Mullin Museum was a group of unrestored cars, mostly Bugattis, in a state of arrested decay. These cars previously belonged to Hans and Fritz Schlumpf, brothers that once owned the largest collection of Bugattis in the world.
The cars in the Schlumpf Reserve collection that are now here in the Mullin collection are generally unrestored cars, or cars that haven't had significant attention paid to them since the late 50s or early 60s. They really have been in static storage in one country or another, either France or here, since the 60s. And they are surprisingly complete. There are a few things missing, maybe on each car, but the Bugatti world is large enough and in touch with each other enough that if the next owner of any of those cars wanted to, those parts can be found. And it's an exciting time. These cars have been parked for over 60 years.
They may not look like much, but these cars are coveted by Bugatti fans.
Interestingly, there are several different types. There are 4 or 5 Type 57s, which of course was the most popular and the most successful of all of the Bugatti models. And they're fantastic. I love seeing them because no 2 are exactly the same. But then there are Type 40s and a Type 40A Roadster that had more horsepower and was kind of the upgrade that came at the end of the Type 40 run. In that particular car, you can really see Jean Bugatti honing his design philosophy. So it's an important car to have, I think, in a Bugatti collection that really shows Jean Bugatti coming into his own out of the shadow of his father, especially in a design sense.
Peter Mullin also collected competition cars, and he raced a vintage Type 35 Bugatti.
Upstairs at the Mullin Museum is a pit area, essentially, of 1930s Le Mans, and the race cars look absolutely perfect in that setting.
Among them, Talbot Lago, Bugatti, of course, and this weird and wonderful Avions Voisins Type C6, known as the Laboratoire. Gabriel Voisin was an aviation pioneer. sort of the French answer to the Wright brothers, and the C6 shows a heavy aviation influence. As the name implies, the C6 Laboratoire was an experimental machine for testing aerodynamic concepts, construction methods, and new mechanical engineering ideas. For example, the propeller at the front was functional. It turned the water pump, and the rear axle's track is much narrower than the front, so that they could eliminate the weight and complexity of a rear differential gear set. Now, this particular car is a faithful recreation of the 1923 original. The actual cars, 4 of them, didn't fare too well at Le Mans in 23. They were fragile, and only one finished the race. Still, this recreation was quite a sight along the Mullin Museum's Le Mans pit row. But all good things must end, and this magnificent museum is no more. The auction was deceptively quiet. It had none of the crowds or constant hum of the Monterey Car Week auctions. Most bidders were on the internet or the phone, but the interest was high and everyone knew what a historic opportunity it was to own one of these cars. Here are just a few results. The 37 Delahaye Cabriolet went for less than it would have cost to restore. The 33 Hispano brought a respectable $2.3 million. This pair of brass-era cars, a Renault and a Panhard, did well. Hopefully they'll see some vintage touring. One of the scruffy Schlumpf Type 57s brought $500,000, and will no doubt cost that much to restore. And the pinnacle of the auction was the 38 Bugatti Type 57 Aravis. At $6.6 million, it brought twice the pre-auction estimate. My thanks to the staff of the Mullin Museum and to everyone at Gooding & Company for their assistance with this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.